So the first question is, how does the addict let go of the shame and address the guilt felt for the pain caused to the partner? This seems to be slowing down our couple's recovery.
This is a great question. By the way, my name is Rob, and I'm a sex addict, and I'm also someone who's been working in the field of sex addiction recovery for almost 25 years. I know a few things, written a few books, opened a few treatment centers. Tammy and I do this every Monday night at 5 o'clock California time. We do this at no cost to you guys, and it's really a Q&A. I'm hard to find, and people like me with my level of experience aren't always easy to get to. So I offer you this opportunity, just ask questions, get stuff off your chest, let us help you figure stuff out. And we don't charge for this. We don't ask anything of you for this. The only thing that we request is you let other people know about the website, and we're trying to build a community. At the moment, we have drop-in groups for partners. Well, I'll let Tammy tell you all that during a little break. But why don't we start getting into the question? So your job here is to ask questions in the Q&A, or if you'd like to come up live, you're certainly welcome to do that. It will be anonymous, but you can do that. Either way, we're going to answer questions for the next 45 minutes to an hour on sex addiction, love addiction, intimacy disorders, and all of the related stuff. So we have a first question, and that is the one time you just read to me, how does the addict let go of shame? Okay, so I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you this in a very direct way. I think it's the most direct I can be about this topic. If I'm an addict and my partner brings up something that reminds me that I'm a shit, or that I'm not worthwhile, or that I'm a bad person, or even if they tell me, screw you, you had an affair, you're not a good person, you're not a good husband, all of that, regardless of where that negative energy is or information is coming at me. Whoops, sorry, trying to save this light. And I'm going to need better lighting at some point. Sorry. Hold on a second. Major failure here. I will answer the question, but I want to keep my life together here. Hold on one second. I don't have a new computer until after Christmas. I got to save this one. Okay. All right. Don't move. Nobody move. Nothing move. We're going to answer this question for you. Okay. I'm sort of stable here. Kind of a little wonky. Sorry. I'm not in my usual spot doing this because of the holiday, so I'm a little bit wonky. But anyway, okay. So, hold on a second. Let me get back to your question. I really want to give you the right answer. So, you may run into things that kick up your shame. I'm certain that I can and do, and certainly spouses are uniquely qualified, as they should be, to make us feel bad about the things we did, and rightfully so. They deserve it. We've hurt them. We've let them down, and it's not a bad thing for them to express that. The question is, what happens to us? How do we tolerate it? And this is really the best advice that I can give you. It's not unusual for someone to come in my office as an individual client, as a male sex addict, and say, I can't believe I did this to my family. I let them down. I hurt them. I never wanted to be this kind of father. I never wanted to be this kind of dad. I never wanted my wife to look at me that way. I never wanted my kids to be sad about our relationship. And he starts to cry. And I will stop him, because what he's doing is shaming himself. He's crying essentially crocodile tears. Shame is, in essence, in this kind of work, an excuse in a way, or I don't mean excuse, that's not the right word. Shame is a distraction. That's the way. Because if you were saying to me in my office, I can't believe I'm a terrible husband, my wife won't look at me the same way, I'm a really bad guy, she thinks, you're just still talking about you. And shame is all about me, how bad I am, how horrible I am, what's wrong with me. That is not the road to healing. I had a really great therapist who put it very succinctly to me once. He said, when you get in that place of shame and self-hatred, and he said, there's no there. There's no learning there. There's no growth there. There's nothing there except feeling bad about yourself. And when you're in that shame spiral place, the most important thing to do is just get yourself out of there. Because the real empathy for your spouse would sound something like, I can't believe he or she's been going through this. What must that be like for them? I wonder what it's like for my wife or boyfriend or girlfriend to wake up in the morning and look at me and realize that I've hurt them. That's empathy. It isn't about how bad I am. It's about someone else's experience. So when I get into a shame spiral for whatever reason, started by someone else or just my own process, the most important thing I can do is get out of it as quickly as possible. It doesn't matter what's in there or what I'm obsessing about. That's useless. Go play golf. Go to a meeting. Go to a movie. Get yourself out of that space. and then figure out not necessarily what your part is in all of this, but how all of this might be affecting the other person, and focus on that. Because when you're focusing on your wife's pain or your children's experience, and you're really in what they're going through, you won't be in shame. You may feel badly or guilty or badly about what you did, and that's perfectly appropriate. We should feel badly about the things that we've done. That's a lesson learned. But to go into obsessive self-hatred and I'm so terrible, I'm so awful, is really our own self-obsession. And it's our job to get out of there as quickly as we can so that we can have empathy for other people. When we're self-obsessed, no room for others, positive or negative. What else we got? We got some questions cooking down there. I like it.
Yeah, well, I really like that too, because the first thing that'll take me out of myself is thinking about how the other person is feeling. So,
great.
Okay. If intimacy is one of the key underlying needs of a sex addict, and seeing prostitutes provide zero intimacy in meeting this need, why would the addict not look elsewhere for needed intimacy?
Sex addiction is an intimacy disorder. Those of us who struggle with sex addiction run away from intimacy and long for it at the same time. We're like somebody who's forever hungry but cannot quite reach the grapes in the tree that are growing above him, and we're also forever thirsty, and we can never quite get to that water that's sitting at our knees, because when we go down to dip for it, it goes down. In other words, what we really want, which is love, connection, relationship, and intimacy, is just out of reach because we're terrified of it. And when it starts to get close, we run away. We're often distance ourselves from people in situations where we might really be known, loved, and valued, because that's where we could really be hurt. Let me flip it. No prostitute is ever going to let me down, hurt my feelings, make me feel unloved. I'll just go on to the next prostitute. No porn is ever going to make me feel like I'm not a good enough person to be loved, or nobody cares about me. It's just porn. But if someone I care about, if I really let them into my heart, into my soul, if I really let them connect with me deeply, they can hurt me and they can let me down. So as a sex addict, as an active sex addict, the ideal life, if you will, before recovery, is to have a spouse who is clueless, so that we can feel connected and plugged into family life, community, pair bonding, all that stuff, but to be able to keep them clueless enough so we can sexually act out all over the place. That's what the ideal for a sex addict is, to have a clueless partner and have a superficial relationship with them. And then whenever we get scared or upset or long for something, or whatever emotional state we get in that we can't tolerate, we don't turn to you, because that would be intimate. We run away from the intimacy toward the anonymous sex, which makes us feel better for the moment, but never, ever meets our deeper need for connection. So as a spouse, if you're writing and you're a spouse, you're absolutely right. What the man or woman in your life needs is more of you, more connection, more loving, more bond. But that's frightening to them, and so that's why they run away from it. It's not that they don't need intimacy, and it's not that intimacy can be found with a prostitute. It's that sex addicts long for something that they don't know what to do with when they have it.
Okay, the next question. Hi, Dr. Rob. I've been reading your book, Prodependence, and it was recommended that I read the last chapter because based on my experience, I relate to Sam's story. He experiences chaos in his childhood. He is attracted to craziness. You speak of emotional resonance. How does one change the emotional resonance that one is attracted to based on past history and the things that one seems drawn to?
Wow, that's a fabulous question. I want to capture that one forever. Whoever wrote that question, good job. It's interesting. Tammy and I were just consulting with a gentleman on this work, and he kind of wanted to see the best therapist he could for a day and a half to get this intimacy problem solved. And I think in some way your question kind of relates to that, in that becoming comfortable with being more intimate with healthy people, being comfortable letting healthy people in and becoming known by them and vulnerable to them is a process that we take over time. It doesn't happen right away. And one of the best things that we can do is work in therapy and work in 12-step on intimacy and relationships to make it more tolerable and comfortable. So, those of us who are in recovery, we work on having relationships with stable people like a sponsor. like a therapist, like some of the people in our groups, like in therapy or therapy groups. We work on maintaining our stable relationships even when they become difficult or problematic or we want to run away. It's almost like practicing. If you're already in an intimate relationship, it's about practicing health in that relationship and healthy boundaries and all of that kind of stuff. One of the things I wrote about in that book, in Codependence, the chapter you were talking about is called Twos Don't Marry Sevens, and it's about emotionally challenged people marrying and getting involved with other emotionally challenged people, and that's what we seem to do. And you're right, we will forever on some level. If I grew up with unavailable, I'm always going to want to get someone's attention. If I grew up with too much, I'm always going to be kind of trying to keep someone back. A little bit's too much for me. You know, those things are going to be with us for life. So, but here's the thing. So I'll give you the best way. I think I wrote about it this way in the book. It's fine if you are attracted to someone who's emotionally unavailable because you might have similar problems. And if you are with that person, and if both of you are people who work on themselves and want to grow, maybe the two of you are threes emotionally and you can become fives together. I think two emotionally challenged people have the best opportunity for growth together, provided that if you're a woman and you decide to date someone and you're attracted to them, make sure that they've already gotten sober. Make sure if they have a drinking issue, or pay attention to whether they tell the truth or not. Ask them if you're attracted to them, and that means to you probably they have a few issues based on your experience. That's fine, that's great, but make sure they're in therapy or have been in therapy. In other words, there's nothing wrong with someone else having these issues, but make sure that they have the skill set or the availability to work on it. Because if you're working on the issues in a relationship and you get involved with someone who doesn't have the same rule book as you do, then you're not going to be able to become fives. You're going to get dragged down to the level that they're at. So my answer to you is you're never going to meet. My answer is two-part. One is that we can grow the amount of intimacy we can tolerate, and the ways that we grow that intimacy in healthy ways by working on that in therapy and in 12-step programs. No question. The other piece is we will probably never pick someone who is perfectly healthy. They would be boring. That would not interest us. We're always going to be chasing or being chased. That's our stuff, and you will find if you've done this game long enough that sometimes you're chasing, sometimes someone's chasing you, but either way, it's like there's a bubble between you and you never really get close enough to that person. In order to burst that bubble and get closer, you got to be with someone who's as committed to healing as you are, who has some awareness that they are troubled and they need to work on their stuff, and that your mutual attraction is what it is. It's mutual attraction, but that also buried within that are the seeds for your mutual healing or to bring down your relationship. It really depends on how actively working you both are to be healing ongoing. And my last thing about this is that I remember a very famous comedian who's a sex addict saying once he'd met this very famous rock star and they got married. And I remember him saying, because he was an out sex addict in the media, he said in the media, well, I know I wrote a lot about being a sex addict, but I'm going to start a sex addict now because I met the person that I love. And now that I love her and we're all caught up with each other, I don't want to act out sexually anymore. Well, that's not recovery. That's just, the early stages of romance and getting connected. So I think you have to be around someone long enough to get past the initial, oh my God, they're all starlight and moonbeams, to be able to decide if they're right for you, because we're not good at, our biggest challenge is discernment, being willing to see and open our eyes. We get too emotionally involved in a relationship and then we don't see, oh yeah, but he's a heroin addict and he's still married. We don't see that because we just think he was really nice to me and look at the way he looked at me. We have to be able to keep a balance of emotions and intellect in dating. And if you're not good at that, then you just need other people in your life who can be your intellect, so that when you're all like, oh, he's so wonderful and this and they can say that's nice, but you don't get to date him because he's a heroin addict. And then you move on. You use the intellect that someone else lends you to make a good decision. Hopefully that's helpful.
It is. Okay, next question. I would like to know how real, quote unquote, the sexual experiences for the porn addict as they seek and find the, quote unquote, perfect image to masturbate to. I have read that the brain doesn't discriminate between the fantasy and reality when the addict actually ejaculates. If so, is that the reason the brain rewires to prefer the fantasy?
Okay. Let me try to say this in a simple way. If you gave me chocolate chip cookies and ice cream every single day, I would really like that. And then if you broke it up with a little cheesecake and some chocolate chip cookies, that would be even better. But if you're going to tell me that every day I'm going to eat three squares a day and once in a while get a treat, that's just not going to be so interesting to me. Well, real relationships are 3 squares a day with a little treat once in a while. They're not these incredible highs of, oh my God, that was great, and look at this new thing. And looking at porn is a constant experience of new stimulation. You're never looking at the same image twice. If it's moving, you're not, and if it's different people, you're not. So, but when you're with someone sexually and spending time with them, you are with the same person over and over again. So being with a person and getting to know them intimately in terms of relationship and sex is a complex and complicated endeavor. It takes more than getting an erection. I can get an erection when I look at porn, and I can get off when I look at porn. And that becomes a very easy circuit to pleasure, just like cheesecake and candy and cookies might be. But to go out and cook myself a decent meal and then sit down and eat it, well, that actually takes work, experience, and knowledge. And some of us just want to take the easy way out. I understand that there are lots of people who never cook dinner for themselves, and all they eat is yo-yos and dum-dums, and guess what? They're 300 pounds and miserable. You have to put some work into your health if you want to be healthy. It's true in physical life. It's true in your emotional life. So if I continually look at porn, all those new images, all those new bodies, I will begin to have as a biological norm a very high level of newness and intensity. Relationships, when they're meaningful, are not about newness and intensity. They're more about familiarity and comfort and love. So if you have trained your brain that the most exciting, intense thing is orgasm to strangers, one after another, being with the same person regularly is not going to produce that same level of excitement. And what most porn addicts, in fact, I would suggest almost all of them, don't know, and what a lot of sex addicts don't know, is that intimate sexuality with a partner that you love and have a caring relationship with is a crazy kind of orgasm, but it's not the same as seeing a stranger on the street and then go having sex with them. If a sex addict is longing for chocolate chip cookies every day and cheesecake, you don't get that in a relationship. It's not how life works, nor should you. Relationships are about broccoli and salad and steak and, all of it. And then once in a while you get a brownie for dessert. Life is like that. Let me try this on you and I'll stop. I had a great therapist friend of mine who said that recovery from sex addiction should mean that life is just one notch above boring. A life well lived should have, maybe you have a few big highs like a marriage or a child is born, you have a few big lows, people die, there's accidents, shit happens. But generally, life should be moderately enjoyable with a few highs and a few lows. That's what the brain should be trained to. If you train your brain to intense dopaminergic surges when you're looking at hundreds of images that change constantly, and you train your brain to live at that level of intensity on a regular basis, hanging out with friends just isn't that interesting. So the porn addicts have to eliminate all of that intensity and then go back and retread into relationships, connection, fun, recreation, the things that make life worthwhile. Seeing a friend, taking a yoga class, going shopping, having a Christmas, fixing your house, going to school, little things that make you feel good about yourself, connecting with other people. That's what life's about. If your life is about the high of an intense experience over and over again, it doesn't matter whether it's alcohol or sex, you're not living life, you're just getting high.
So the next question is, how long does it take once in recovery to have the brain pathways rewired so the addictive pathways are less likely to be used?
Well, if you're talking about a porn addict, I think the first thing you got to do is put the porn down. And the second thing is that it's not like, and this is important for all sex addicts, actually all addicts. A lot of times we think in the beginning, well, recovery and real healing is about not doing those things. I don't see that person, I don't have sex with that, I don't go here, I don't do that. We think that recovery and healing is a lot about not doing things. The truth is that real recovery is about embracing life on every level. It's about being out there and participating and connecting, which starts with 12-step meetings and therapy, but branches out hopefully into being a part of life. just because you stop masturbating to porn or stop having sex with strangers does not bring you into life. It doesn't bring you the casual pleasures that come from succeeding when you stand back and say, wow, my house is painted and I did that, or wow, I passed that test, or wow, we went bowling and had a good time. Those things you have to actually go out and do. And most addicts, in my experience, fall on their face, not so much because they didn't know what they should not so much because they didn't know what, how do I say that with a positive? Most addicts fall on their face because they're not doing enough things to enjoy their lives. They're too focused on not doing things that they think are bad, but they're not doing the things that will make them happy. And that's a big piece of recovery.
I'm going to concur with that. My therapist, when I was leaving treatment, said, if you don't make recovery fun, you're not going to make it. And I held on to that, and I worked really hard on doing fun and different things. It was like I went out and I went roller skating. I went cross country skiing. I was connected with other people, doing new activities, and probably retraining my brain. And it's one day at a time worked for me.
So you asked how long. If you're a porn addict and whether that's really your issue, you're not out seeing prostitutes or going to massage parlor, you don't have all the other sex addict stuff, you got to I would consider you're not going to be picking the porn up again, period. Why do you need porn? It's like an alcoholic. You can have a perfectly happy life without alcohol. You can have a perfectly good life without porn and a good sex life. In fact, that is a great place to start for some people, is to say, well, I can masturbate if I want, but no more porn. And then if they find themselves being compulsively masturbating to fantasy, maybe they have to look at how often they masturbate and in what way. But the first step is taking yourself out of all that intense fantasy. And the next step is bringing yourself into life. And you have to be practicing both equally. Let's go on to the next question.
There aren't any other questions. So if you have a question, add it, but I'm going to give a quick plug for our other webinars, drop-in groups, and podcasts. So on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, you can link into a number of podcasts on iTunes, Android, and other Stitcher, etc. So, and there's a lot of them on all different topics. They've been very popular. People have really appreciated them. Then Rob mentioned there are other webinars and drop-in groups. The drop-in group is a different format than these webinars. The webinars are specifically where you are able to ask questions of the host, but you are not visible. With a drop-in group, it's a different format, and there's a drop-in group for partners, there's a drop-in group for gay addicts, there's 2 different drop-in groups for men. One is geared towards porn and sex addiction. The other is more about sex addiction. All of these are listed on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. If you have not already registered, I'd invite you to do so, because then you'll get the notifications both of when they are and if there's any updates on those. And then there's a number of webinars, John Taylor, Kristen Snowden, David Fawcett, and I'm forgetting somebody. Oh, Arturo, not Arturo, Humberto offers one in Spanish. So we have, and we're adding more. We're going to have one on spirituality. We're going to have one on codependence. So somebody asked about that. We're going to have one on that. There's drop-in groups for, like I said, partners and addicts and all kinds of things, but also the various webinars. So there's more ways to connect even on this website.
And let me just briefly say what a drop-in group is. It is different than this. Everyone in the room sees each other. We're not doing any recording.
If you want, you can share your camera or not.
Or you can share nothing. But yes, the point is that you're there live talking to each other about recovery from addiction or being married to someone who we have professionals who monitor those groups to make sure nothing bad happens in them and that everything is kept on the even keel. And they're really the best places for you to start to get support. 12-step meetings, same thing, but a lot of times you just want to talk to somebody, or you'll find folks, you'll make friends, you'll start talking to people. That's what the drop-in, and as Tammy said, they're drop-in groups for different people. So addicts get a drop-in group, partners and spouses, people who have spiritual and religious issues, gay men. We have all kinds of different drop-in groups, different lectures. We are giving this work away for free. That's the work that we're doing. So please take advantage of it. It's no fun to be in those drop-in groups by ourselves.
That hasn't happened. So far that has not happened. So
anyway, thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah, and I was on one of the partner groups, and we'll be doing the partner group this Wednesday, guest moderating that one. But people were like, I've never been able to connect with other partners. It was really valuable. And it's different than a 12-step meeting. So, where there's no crosstalk or whatever, like people threw out a question and, people are going like, this is what I did. And in one case, the person sharing said, this is what I did and it didn't work. I hope you don't do this, So I thought it was really valuable from that standpoint as well. So, okay, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, Tammy, you sit in on a lot of them just to see what's going on and check in. And
yeah,
Tammy is your brother.
None of the men's groups. I don't.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, but yes. So but the webinars I'm on, but the drop-in groups only the partners.
Really quick. Some of you asked how to reach me, and I just want to say you can write me at rob@sexandrelationshiphealing.com, and that's how you find me. Drop me a note. And Tammy and I are constantly referring people to therapists or to workshops or whatever it is you're looking for. That's a part of what we're here to offer is direction for how to find help if you want it. So write us.
Yes.
And by the way, if you contact me on sex and relationship healing, you're probably going to get Tammy.
That's probably true.
Questions.
Okay. The next one. What can a partner expect from a husband in recovery the first year?
Well, I would like to, if that person's online, can you ask them to define it? And I'll say what I mean. Do you mean, because that's a very big question. So what can you expect in terms of his recovery, like him just with his sexual stuff? What can you expect in terms of how he treats you? What can you expect in terms of sex between you or love between you? Or what can you expect from your own feelings? Like, can you define that further? And we can ask another question and then come back to that one.
Okay, so we'll come back to that one. So the next one is, can you describe the benefits of an accountability partner and how you can pick a good one? That's it.
Yeah, so here's the way that recovery works. You heard me say, well, actually, I didn't say this to you guys. I said in our meeting earlier, it doesn't matter how successful you've been in life or how many achievements you have or all the great things that you've been able to do on your own. When it comes to these issues, we can't do it without other people. Whether that's therapy or groups or workshops or even just this kind of stuff, we have a problem with intimacy and relationships and sex. So we can't work through an intimacy problem without having relationships with others to guide us, to be role models, to challenge us when our thinking isn't right. If we knew how to fix this on our own, we would, but we don't. So we need other people, and that is sort of a given with the process. That leads to an accountability partner. What is an accountability partner? It means that I'm an addict, and I know there are situations in the world where I might be vulnerable or need direction or need to know that somebody's there for me to check my thinking. So for example, let's say I struggle being online and I end up looking at porn or chatting people up or whatever it is. I might do something like have an accountability partner to whom I say, listen, every time I go online, I'm going to leave a message on your voicemail or text you. And when I get offline, I'm going to leave a voicemail or text you every time I go online because I'm going to be accountable to you for the behavior I engage in online. Another way to have accountability partner might be if you're just starting dating and you have a history of dating the wrong person. When you start dating, you have an accountability partner who knows your stuff and who will hold you accountable to who that was, what you did on that date, whether you were sexual or not, all the things that you left to our own devices. We are really good at convincing ourselves that what we are uncomfortable with isn't true. In other words, we're really good at denial, and we're really good at convincing ourselves that things are okay when they're not. So having somebody there to say, I do think your thinking is questionable there, let's talk about it, is a gift for us in areas where our thinking isn't always clear.
So to elaborate on the other question, how does the sex addict in recovery typically treat the spouse in the first year?
I can tell you, okay, so this is a two-part question. I wrote a book about this called Out of the Doghouse, a relationship saving guide for men caught cheating. The reason I wrote Out of the Doghouse is because I have worked for 25 years in this field. I've worked with hundreds, if not thousands of people. And what I have observed is that men who have hurt a woman in particular really seem to struggle with how to heal that relationship. So you're going to see one of two things. You're either going to see a husband who really gets how he's hurt you, really understands over time the degree to which he's hurt the relationship, And he's going to be very, very active in wanting to show empathy, show compassion, not let you down, check in with you, reassure you, and do the right stuff for a while. The way he should come home or come back or be present in the first year is not arguing with you, well, I didn't do that today, so why are you mad at me? But saying, you know, whatever I was doing today, I can understand why you're mad at me, because look what I was doing. You're going to have someone who's empathic, understanding, reflective, owns their stuff, even is willing to put up with being accused of things they didn't do, because after all, why wouldn't they be, after all, because they used to do those things when they were lying. So if you have someone who is pliable, who is open to owning their part on a regular basis, who shows humility toward you about the hurt and harm that was caused consistently, that's the kind of person I'd want to come home to. Unfortunately, addicts don't always get it right away. I've worked with many an addict who says, well, it's been 60 days and I've been going to meetings and I'm seeing that therapist, and how come she hasn't forgiven me? Or how come she isn't over it? Or why do I keep getting that unhappy face? It's been 90 days. Well, because you cheated for 9 years. It's not unusual for addicts to not understand the degree to which they've hurt you, the amount of pain that they've caused their families, or what it takes to get well. And that's why I wrote that book. So, because they often need a slap in the face. My experience of most sex addicts is it's amazing that you've stayed with us. I don't know why you would have. You have every right to have left a long time ago. And the fact that you're even willing to give us a chance to work it out is something we should show great humility and gratitude for, rather than being resentful and pissy and annoyed that we're not getting our way, which is the addict who hasn't figured it out yet. So those are the two extremes, and anything in between, can be graded accordingly. That's pretty much it. By the way, one more thing. Your husband, expectations. You should expect he's going to 12 steps meetings or some kind of support group every week. If he's not, I would worry. You should expect that he's in some kind of therapy or seeing some kind of clergy or professional on a regular basis. If not, I would worry. The first year is a time of a lot of vulnerability, a lot of change, a lot of fear. And this is a time when we need a lot of guidance, and the time when professionals and people who've been to the mat with this issue can really be most helpful. So I would not expect that someone in the first year would be spending a lot of time doing, let me reverse that. I would expect that someone coming home who's starting their recovery for the first year would be doing a lot of work on that recovery, and that as a partner, I would see them doing it, which would reassure me. It wouldn't be I'd like him or her to go out another evening. When they used to go out, they were having sex. Now they're going to 12-step meetings. But underneath, I would feel really encouraged that they are pushing themselves to go out and do this work and heal.
So you mentioned out of the doghouse, and I typed that in the chat, and then a question came up. Would that apply if the wife is the sex addict? And I was thinking I could definitely make a case for it. There's so many great tools in that book, and I could totally see that could be useful from that standpoint. What are your thoughts?
Well, I wrote a book for men to understand what a woman goes through typically when she experiences profound betrayal. Men often experience betrayal in a different way, and our responses to it are different. If you are a woman who can read through the lens of, well, I'm not a guy, I'm a girl, and I acted out, and I'm that sex addict, and his reactions may not be all these ones that are being talked about, yeah, I think it's useful to get a sense of what empathy looks like, because empathy is empathy. I think it's useful to get a sense of what being non-defensive really looks like. I think it helps really give you a sense of what owning your shit looks like when you just want to pretend it isn't there. So all the accountability parts are there, but it is shifted by gender, and that is unavoidable. 75% of the people, 80% of the people I work with are men who've hurt a woman. So those are the people who got a book.
So next question. You say in your book, Prodependence, that, and I'll quote, addiction is not the pursuit of sobriety, it's the pursuit of healthy, intimate, ongoing connection, and to maintain healthy, supportive emotional bonds. I recognize that I have trouble opening up to people. I have a fear that if I reach out to a therapist, I may have trouble opening up to them. I seem to have seem to have many repressed memories that I cannot recall. I even seem to have a lapse of memory, even not being able to recall almost a decade worth of time. How could I access these memories enough to talk about them and seek help? I've heard of a therapy practice called EMDR.
So let me just say something about EMDR. EMDR is a technique that is used to work with people who are working on trauma while they're doing long-term therapy. It's also used sometimes if people have a discrete fear, like people who are afraid of flying or have afraid of water. Or EMDR is very useful with reactivity, but it doesn't solve or help you get in touch with the issues. So just to say it, it's nice to see a therapist who knows EMDR, but that's not. But EMDR is not what therapy is. It's a part of some therapy. A trauma specialist has many tools in their toolkit, including EMDR, or they may say, well, I don't do EMDR, but I'll know when you need it, and I'll send you to someone who does it, and then we'll talk about those sessions, because generally EMDR is something you might do a few times, but you're not going to be doing it every time. It's not therapy. It's a support to therapy, at least for trauma survivors. Sorry, and now I knew I was going to ask you, Tammy. What was the first half of the question? Sorry.
It is, I have a fear that if I reach out to a therapist, I may have trouble opening up to them.
Right. You probably will, but fear is never a reason to not get well. Besides, it's not in this process. You're going to be afraid of a lot of things, and I think that you have to be willing to walk hand in hand with those fears, knowing that if you choose the right person to work with, your life's going to get better. I mean, you're going to feel more comfortable, more at ease. You're going to have a support person. You may be paying them, but they are there for you. And by the way, they don't get angry if you don't come over for Christmas dinner. It's not that kind of relationship. And that's the gift of paying for therapy, is that you have no obligation to this person, and they are fully obligated to supporting and helping you. So I would consider you are more in danger of fearful. Look, Tammy, I'm holding up a light, like I want to say, like the Statue of Liberty. I'm actually holding this light. I think you have a better chance of lowering your fears around recovery and healing when you're seeing someone than if you're not. And a good therapist, and we know people all over the country, we're glad to recommend you to someone. We get no kickbacks. We do it because we are trying to do good work here. If you're seeing a good therapist, they're going to take into account your fears, and they're going to pace the therapy so that you're not overwhelmed. I mean, that's part of what a good therapist does. You may talk about your day-to-day life and how to improve your day-to-day life for a few months before you feel strong enough and things are going well enough to begin to talk about trauma. And that therapist is going to be attuned to that and helping support you feeling better day to day before you start looking at anything underneath, because the goal is to have you be more functional, not less. So I think the key is finding someone who really knows what they're doing and then beginning to trust them. But from where you're sitting now, I'm afraid of what might happen. Well, you have no idea what's going to happen. So that's all really in your head. And I think for this work, you have to get out of your head and into action. Get yourself to that therapist or interviewing a few therapists and see who feels comfortable to you and get to work. If you feel afraid, you can tell them. That's good. Feeling afraid in therapy is what you need to do. But feeling afraid keeping you getting to therapy, not such a good thing and not helpful.
Right. I've been in therapy for many years, off and on, whenever I needed it. But
Thank God, Tammy.
I know, and I am so incredibly grateful. But there were things that came up in this last year. You had a reason to go back for a while, and I thought, wow, I could not have addressed that, even a few years ago. So I think it really unfolds at a pace that you're able to handle. And I have an amazing therapist. So like Rob said, it was like you find somebody that you can help, or that you trust, that can help support you in your process. But it isn't like you're going to be, a can opener, or the first day, you got to figure out this whole 10 years. It isn't like that at all. And he's right. We absolutely can give you referrals to excellent therapists. So next question. Your explanation about abstaining from addictive behavior really spoke to me. My husband has gone for intervals without using porn, but continues to relapse. He has never told on himself, and I have made too many discoveries. He is a compulsive liar, and I am so disappointed that he cannot step up for real recovery. Oops, it just slid. Hang He has just started going to SA meetings because I insisted that we live like roomies until he makes a commitment to heal. I think he is doing this for me instead of him. He has seen many counselors who have tried to get him to get a life, embrace new activities, etc. So far, he does none of that. Should I give up on the notion of that?
So I guess I'm going to speak of a little bit of experience here. I remember long ago, when I first entered the therapy field, when I was studying couples therapy, and I think this is useful, we talked about what therapy can offer a couple and what it can't offer. And I think in some ways, that's what you're asking. So let me help you. If I'm a pretty decent human being who's lost their way because of trauma or abuse or other kinds of brokenness, but I'm a person who has a desire to be real, a desire to be honest, a desire to get closer, a desire to not hurt people, a desire to be a better person, on all of those things. In therapy, you can help me, or let me try it this way. As a couple, if I'm willing to do the work, willing to be accountable, want to learn, want to grow, if I'm that kind of person, then you can help me communicate better, recognize your needs better, help you know my needs better. So within therapy, endless things can happen around how we treat each other, how we act toward each other, how we understand each other. But who I am will never change in therapy. Who you are and who you are will not change in therapy, and who you are with each other will not change in therapy. In other words, the basic essentials of who you are as people. So if your husband is not an honest man and has no desire to be an honest man and doesn't care whether he hurts you or not, just wants things to get better and you to leave him alone so everything goes back to the way it was, that may be who he is. And you're not going to know that until you're not going to know it till you know it. And it may take several experiences of trusting and hoping and wishing and ending up in the same place. Now, I will say that there are men who will keep pushing it and pushing it, thinking they can keep pushing it, and then they realize they went a little too far, and it may take that for him to realize that he needs to take it seriously, or he may not have the ability to take this seriously, and those are different things. Someone who is not just ashamed or embarrassed or self-focused, but really doesn't care how this made you feel, wants you just leave them alone, is tired of your nagging at them, doesn't understand that, you may have to reconsider if this is a life that you want to be in with this person. Because your job is not to be his teacher, his guide, his therapist. Your job is to be his spouse. And that should be something that's fun a lot of the time. You shouldn't have to be constantly waiting and hoping that he's going to decide to be a better person. I wasn't a very nice person for a very long time, and sometimes I'm still not. But I know when I'm not. I work really hard at being a good person, and I correct my stuff when I do it wrong, because I know that my connections and my relationships, especially my most intimate ones, are what keep me thriving. But if I think that all that wild sex out there is what keeps me thriving, and if I could just keep my wife quiet, everything will be great, you're not going to get a lot with that man. So there's an addiction. So let me try. I've got to say more about this. I'm so sorry. There are people who say that addicts seem like immoral people because, like a heroin addict will steal from his kid's college fund, and that kid may not go to college, but that addict wants the money for heroin. He's going to steal from that college fund to get the money. But once sober, it's not unusual for some of us who have intact moral beliefs and ethical beliefs to work 3 jobs to pay back that kid's college fund, because sober, we have other priorities than simply the drugs or the sex or whatever. And then there are people who don't give a shit about other people. And I can't tell you who your husband is, but I can tell you that there are folks who will use people and not think twice about it. Then there are other people who are just they're so ashamed of their behavior, they so don't know any other way out, that they'll continue to block reality because they're so afraid that getting well might mean that they're unworthy or unlovable. Or it sounds like you have the hand, you're dealing the hand here because you're the one who's saying, if you don't do this, then I don't do that. I think you and your husband need to have a real talk about his willingness or lack of willingness to be engaged in this process regardless of whether he sleeps in the next room. Sleeping in the next room is the least of this. Having you in his life is really the question. How long are you willing to put up with someone who will hurt you and let you down and promise you that they're trying but really isn't? Maybe he doesn't believe that you're serious about not letting him into your heart unless he takes this work seriously. Or maybe he's just not capable of taking it seriously. I can't answer that for you. And ultimately, it will be your decision to make based on the actions that he takes and the way that you were treated.
Okay, next question. Do you have any suggestions on how to ease a partner's unbelief of an SA's attempts of brutal honesty?
I think the question is, how can I prove to my spouse that I'm finally being honest? Is that the question?
To ease a partner's disbelief, yeah. So disbelief of, I think I agree.
You can never convince your partner or reassure them that everything's okay. Don't try. It doesn't work that way. You lie to them enough, they don't believe what you say. So now you say, I remember there's a saying about an active addict, they're lying if their lips are moving. Well, your spouse doesn't really trust whether you're active yet or in recovery. And so they don't know if you're being honest or telling the truth. It could take a year or more of your doing very consistent actions over time to restore enough trust for her to look at you differently or him to look for the relationship to really be different. And you're going to have to tolerate a lot of unhappiness and anger and disappointment and stuff that feels like you don't deserve it, it doesn't belong to you, because you've deeply hurt this person. And it's going to take a while before you can make that better. Again, I wrote Out of the Doghouse specifically for this issue, which is understanding that your partner is not going to believe you for a long time, and they're not going to trust you for a long time, and they're going to see your lips moving and not really trust what's coming out of them for a long time. And just because you know that you're really putting your back into it now and you're really on this, and that your spouse doesn't have to believe that. They only get to believe what they see. When we lie for years and years, it takes a while for a partner to believe what we see. The greatest loss in our relationships when we act out is not that we had sex with someone else. It's the breaking of trust. It's that that partner won't ever look at us in quite the same way again. Remember, when you married that person, you promised them to love, protect, whatever you said you were going to do. You screwed that up. You made your desires and your interests, regardless of whether there's addiction or not, you chose to abandon the commitment you made to that spouse and do what you wanted when you wanted to do it, even though you knew it would hurt that person if they knew, and you did it anyway. Well, guess what? They know that now. They know that you're someone who won't necessarily go to the mat for them because you might put yourself first. And that's something that they have to work through over time. And you're going to have to do a lot of putting the relationship first and the needs of the relationship before your own, and your recovery needs before your own, before you can expect trust from that partner. A year or more. Longer than you want it to be. I promise you that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have
Okay.
time for one more question. And
We do.
We're going to go have one.
How can someone who has a limited schedule and limited disposable income go about finding a therapist? I have searched online without any luck. I was looking for individual web therapy sessions, but they were all outrageously priced.
Okay. I would not do any web therapy sessions because web therapy is illegal, except unless you're seeing a therapist in the state where you live. One of the reasons we don't charge for any of this is because we can't. And I don't want to, but we can't, even if we wanted to. So I would not go to any online therapist, period, because my experience of people who are advertising online. So here's the thing about therapy, okay? It is one of the things that you really need to decide to do based on talking to people. You cannot get a good therapy recommendation on Yelp or Facebook, or you can find out about people or about workshops. But in order to know if it's really useful, I think you need to gather information from people who've seen that person, who've had that experience. That's just one thing. I would pass on web therapy. You're not going to get anyone better or cheaper. I would suggest you might write Tammy. We have tricks up our sleeve. We know people who are, let's say, just starting to specialize in this work, and they are not all the way through their CSAT or not all the way, but they might be willing to take a lower fee client in order to start growing. For example, I remember when I was first starting out, I wanted my clients to be in a group. And group therapy, by the way, is extraordinarily effective in this work. If you can get yourself in a group therapy for sex addicts, it will cost much less money, but be actually more effective. Group therapy can be $60, $75 a session, very different than $150 to $200. You'll get a lot out of being in group. You'll get more, in my experience, out of being in group for 2 years than you'll get in all that individual therapy. So that is one way to absolutely do it less expensively, is to get into a group. But also we can find people who are, maybe just starting in their profession or just starting this work and are willing to see folks at a reduced fee, and, drop us a note with where you live, and we'll see if we can't find you somebody.
Well, and, it's not therapy. We are really clear about that. But boy, there can be some very powerful work done, on these webinars and the drop-in groups in particular. If there's a drop-in group that we've created that fits what you're looking for, it really can be very powerful. Like I shared a bit ago, somebody said, here's what I did and don't do this, and here's why, because it was really damaged. Well, that's a really powerful lesson without having to go through 20 therapy sessions of, talking to your therapist about should I do this or not, So I think that can be really beneficial and provide support as well. So just another.
Well, and I want to add to that. I mean, this is the reason we created this site. I can see people for fancy dollars. I can make money in treatment centers. I don't need to make money online. What I'm doing on this website, Sex and Relationship Healing, is I'm taking 25 years of experience. I'm putting every lecture online, every workshop online, every piece of homework. If you really are diligent about being involved on that site, and you get a workbook and you start working, and you don't have to see a therapist. You do need other people in your life as role models and guides who know about this stuff, who struggled with this stuff, who are doing better than you are. And you can find those people in 12-step programs and some of the drop-in groups that we have. You don't have to be in therapy for this. It's helpful, but it's not required. You do, however, have to have a commitment to a regular experience of being around people who are working on this, maybe a couple times a week, like 12-step meetings, here, all of that. I don't think I went to therapy the first 6 years of my recovery. I didn't even know I needed to. But that was fine because I got what I needed. I got the relationships, the healing, the direction, the foundation I needed. And actually, I was a better client in therapy because I had worked on myself outside of therapy first. So, don't despair that that's the only route. There are many, many routes to healing.
Well, and like I mentioned a bit ago, like something came up for me and it was a very specific thing. So, I've been able to go back and work on something, I go, this is a problem. I want to go work on it. And I can have it be a short-term therapy session, versus, being in therapy all the time. So somebody's asking about what the drop-in group and when and where. So the best place to go find the list, because I'll say them all and nobody will remember, but if you go to sexandrelationshiphealing.com, it'll show interactive webinars, and there's a list. So on January 2nd, which is this week, Wednesday, I'm doing the partner drop-in group at 12:30 Pacific time. There is a men's drop-in group on Monday mornings at 10:45 a.m., all Pacific time. There's a sex and porn addiction on Sunday nights at 8 p.m. There's a gay men's group. It's alternating Wednesdays, so I won't get that right. So you need to look at the calendar. We're going to be adding more. But the drop-in group is, unlike this format, you can show your camera. You can also say not share, but you can interact with people. So it's not a 12-step group. It is an opportunity. There's a person that's there to moderate it, but they are not doing a presentation or specifically asking and answering questions. It is, people can share and say, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I'm struggling with, or whatever, or, have you ever experienced, or what should I do, whatever. You can support each other, in that forum, and it's an hour long. And they've been very powerful. People are finding them very useful. So and it's free. So Rob does the in the rooms on Friday night, and he's got 140 people showing up at that. But this is specifically in different categories. So if you identify as a partner, great, come to the partner one. So hopefully that helps.
It would also be helpful for those of you around our world to let us know what you need. If you say, oh my God, that you only have a group with a pastor once a week, I really want a spiritual group more often. Or, that one group you have for spouses, I can't make that, but boy, could you have one in the evenings? Or I'm not promising you can do it, but we are growing this, and we're growing a 24-hour schedule. So eventually, if you wake up at 3 a.m, there'll be somebody in Asia who's doing a group for you if you're a sex addict. We will get there.
Yeah, and I'm working on getting the partners one to have an evening one, and the spirituality that you mentioned. And I'm looking for someone to moderate a female sex addict one, and also a male partner one. So those are on my radar. But we're a little tiny team, and I have to find the right person that's willing to commit time, because they're doing this at most of them are just giving their time. So it's one of those things where we're going to add more resources. If you haven't registered on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, it's the best way to be informed. We send out notices about what's coming up this week, and you'll get those notices, and you can add it to your calendar and show up. So I'd encourage you to do that.
And we were glad to give your time. And I just want to say, New Year's, holidays, all of that difficult, but there is a sense of renewal. There is a really an opportunity to wipe your slate a little bit and say, this year can be different for me. And I don't mean I don't mean New Year's resolutions. I mean how you want to feel about yourself next year. How do you want to treat people next year? What situation in your life that's been bugging you do you want to get out of your life next year? Those are the kinds of things that can make a difference. And we will be there to support as best we can.
We will. So with optimism, we enter 2019. So
absolutely. Love each other. Love yourself.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you all for showing up.
We shall return.
Bye-bye.